Descending from the crest of La Bajada Hill in Santa Fe, one's first glimpse is of the surrounding Sangre de Cristo, Jemez, and Ortiz mountains. These ranges are part of a broader landscape created from widespread volcanic activity that occurred 70 million years ago. For centuries, Santa Fe's mountain vortex has served as a beacon for those seeking spiritual transformation. Santa Fe wouldn't exist as the city of holy faith if it weren't for the longest war in recorded history. From 718 AD through 1492, the Spanish and the Moors battled over territory and religious dominance. In 1491, following the last 10-year war with the Moors, Queen Isabel and King Ferdinand reconquered an area located 12 kilometers south of Granada in Andalusia. Since it had been a crusade of the cross against the Moors, Isabel refused to have the newly constructed town named in her honor, preferring to call it Santa Fe de la Vega. It was there that Christopher Columbus was granted a license a few months after the end of the war, which provided financial incentives for him to search for newfound land. 2 more cities in Spain were also given the name Santa Fe, one in the region of Barcelona and the other in the province of Almeria. In 1610, the capital city of New Mexico was christened La Villa Real de Santa Fe de San Francisco de Asís, the royal city of holy faith of Saint Francis of Assisi. Santa Fe, New Mexico is the 4th of 13 official cities around the world named Santa Fe. Eventually, the Spanish and the Moors ratified conditions in Santa Fe de la Vega in November of 1491. As had been the tradition in medieval wars between the Christians and the Muslims, the submission took form by a surrender on agreed terms. In return for delivering the city, the inhabitants were guaranteed their customs, property, laws, and religion. The last of these was to be guaranteed forever. But by 1500, Christianity was imposed by coercion, and the Muslims were baptized as Christians and called Moriscos. The elite Muslim families found that intolerable and chose to immigrate to North Africa. With the crushing of Muslim Granada, the Christian Spain was invigorated, and religious authorities began to reconsider the question of Jews in southern Spain. After the fall of Granada, the inquisitors felt it would be a fitting moment for the crown to bring the conversion of the Jews. According to medieval tradition in Europe, the conversion would be a signal for the second coming of Christ. With the end of Moorish occupation, Isabel la Católica, as the queen became known, began the largest evangelization of Christianity since the time of the Apostles, when she sponsored the 1492 expedition to America. Queen Isabel's determination to promote Christianity throughout the New World was rooted in the early history of Spain's patron saint, Santiago de Compostela, Saint James, who was one of the 12 apostles. When the Spaniards arrived in New Mexico, they forced the Native Americans to Christianity, so that the Indians had to secretly practice their own spirituality. During this time, many of New Mexico's early Spanish settlers also practiced a hidden faith. They were the Sephardic Jews who had eluded the Inquisition under the guise of being conversos, Jews who had converted to Catholicism. They began known as crypto-Jews because they practiced their Jewish faith secretly while presenting a different persona to the public. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that revelations of their existence came to light. One curiosity, possibly the earliest evidence of the convergence of spiritual practices in this country, arrived from the Arab world via Spain. The dance known as Los Matechines is a performance ritual believed to be of Arabic origin, that was used by the Franciscan missionaries as a way of converting the Indians to Catholicism. The matachin dancers most probably entered Spain from Morocco. In the Diccionario de la Lengua Español, matachin is translated from the Arabic word meaning masked. The 12 masked dancers are said to be representative of the 12 apostles. But because the dance is performed as a form of entertainment, the matachin dance is more akin to sacred clowns, like the amusing trickster genre found in Native American myths. The abuelo, or grandfather, is a central figure in the dance, as it is to grandfather, the Great Spirit, that the Native Americans pray. Over its long history, Santa Fe San Miguel Mission has served as a barrio church, a military chapel, an oratory for the Christian Brothers, and, most recently, as a revered shrine to Saint Michael, the patron saint of the dying. The legend of the first church bell goes back to Spain and its 8-century-long battle with the Moors. The constant warring between the two groups created a state of fear among the Spanish population. In the small hamlet of San Jose in Andalusia, the villagers prayed to Saint Joseph for protection. They promised that if they were saved from the Moors, they would honor him. With their prayers answered, a bell was cast as a tribute of appreciation. Through their unrelenting faith and prayers, they believed that each time the bell rang, the power of the Moors declined. The bell rang triumphantly every time the Christians gained victory until their enemy was finally expelled from Spain. La Castrense was a military chapel located on the south side of the Santa Fe Plaza from 1760 through 1859. The chapel was utilized by members of the Spanish Presidio. Our Lady of Light stone reredo, or altar screen, that was created by Bernardo Miera y Pacheco, was included in the original construction of the church and currently resides at Cristo Rey Church on Canyon Road. On August 8, 1846, General Stephen Kearny and his army entered Santa Fe, and by the following morning the American flag flew atop the roof of the Palace of the Governors, declaring a new government. As a result of the Mexican-American War, a third of Mexico's territory was handed over to the Americans as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The floodgates of old European-based religions opened and Santa Fe was to be transformed. Divine Providence brought a jolt of spirituality to Santa Fe during the second half of the 19th century. Just as the Spanish explorers believed themselves to be superior when they arrived, the Anglo-Saxons who colonized the eastern seaboard thought that they were entitled to claim America as their own. With the 1845 Manifest Destiny Decree, they believed they were following a preordained path laid out by God as they pursued a westward expansion. The Mormon Battalion was part of General Kearny's army and the only religious-based unit in the military history of the United States. The Mormon Battalion Monument is located between Santa Fe and Albuquerque on Interstate 25. The first Protestant church was the Baptist Church built at Fort Marcy in 1847 as part of the New Mexico-Arizona Baptist Mission. It's not clear how long the Baptist work continued in Santa Fe, but the historic records show that the property was sold by the Home Mission Society to the Presbyterians on May 4, 1869. After the missionaries left, there wasn't any active representation of the Baptist faith for the next 50 years. In 1917, the First Baptist Church began services in a tent on a lot located at Manhattan and Don Gaspar Avenues, where they eventually built a church. In 2017, the First Baptist Church celebrated 100 years in Santa Fe, while the First Presbyterian Church celebrated 150 years in the capital city. Like the Mexican War that brought a new breed of spirituality to Santa Fe, the Civil War brought Freemasonry. In 1909, Harper Cunningham, a former private in the Union Army and the Attorney General of Oklahoma, arrived in Santa Fe. A member of the Freemason organization, he began work on establishing a chapter for the Masons. Although Freemasonry is not a religion, the Masons believe in a supreme being and work for the betterment of society. Santa Fe's Scottish Rite Masonic Temple opened in 1912, the year that New Mexico became a state. A wall hanging at the Scottish Rite Masonic Temple in Santa Fe depicts the different forms of spirituality that they adhere to. 36 years after the start of the American occupation, this 1882 bird's eye view of Santa Fe featured the following religious establishments: the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi, the Sisters of Loretto Convent and Academy, St. Michael's College, San Miguel Mission Church, the Congregation Church, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, the Methodist Church, the First Presbyterian Church, and the Holy Faith Episcopal Church. At the beginning of World War I, a group of Lutheran pacifists found their way to Santa Fe. Their objection to that war followed a long history of their Christian social consciousness based on the teachings of the gospel. In the fall of 1914, the first recorded Lutheran worship services in Santa Fe took place, with 5 adults in attendance. Olive Rush came to Santa Fe in 1920. Like most artists, Rush was drawn to Santa Fe's tranquil landscape and ever-changing light. Her arrival brought Quakerism and the inner light to Santa Fe. Born in 1873 in Fairmont, Indiana, Olive Rush came from a long line of Quakers who were followers of the 17th century religious leader George Fox. They were known as the Children of Light, referring to the light or inspiration of the inner Christ. Their gatherings, largely characterized by long periods of silence, were sporadically broken by the utterances of members when led by divine inspiration. When under the influence of the Spirit, the speaker would tremble and quake, therein gaining the name Quakers from outside observers. Today, the self-named Religious Society of Friends identifies this type of worship as a form of meditation. It differs from Buddhist meditation in that during the prolonged silence, one or more members will break the silence with a message of guidance from within. During World War II, the Department of Justice purchased the Civilian Conservation Corps camp in Santa Fe, which was transformed to become the Japanese internment camp, one of several opened throughout the country in areas considered to be of military importance to the safety of all Americans. 4,550 men were imprisoned at the Santa Fe Japanese internment camp. These so-called enemy combatants were teachers, journalists, businessmen, and artists, the type of people the American government felt posed a threat because they were free thinkers. They were forced to leave their families, businesses, and all ties to the community. Among these prisoners were Buddhist ministers who shared the teachings of Buddha at the camp. It was during this dark time in U.S. history that the seeds of Buddhism were planted in Santa Fe, although it would be another 3 decades before Buddhism took root. In 1950, the People's Republic of China invaded Tibet and by 1959 had taken control of the country, ousting the Dalai Lama, who fled with 80 of his close followers to India. More than 87,000 Tibetans were killed and another 100,000 fled to India, Nepal, and Bhutan. The new government imposed Chinese law and custom in the region, and all the Buddhist monasteries were closed. By 1962, 340,000 Tibetans died during famines caused by the repression of the totalitarian regime. For the next 25 years, the people of Tibet lived under virtual martial law. It wasn't long after that the rest of the world began to take notice. Through the ongoing efforts of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, many Tibetans have been allowed to leave their beloved homeland in search of a better life. Santa Fe's Project Tibet was founded in 1980 by Paul Jor Thundup, who fled eastern Tibet in 1959 at the age of 12. After living in India and in England, he received a scholarship to attend the College of Santa Fe. Thundup started an importing company that sold Tibetan weavings and rugs as a way of promoting Tibetan culture and Mahayana Buddhism. On September 2, 1997, the Tibetan Association of Santa Fe was founded to preserve their language, culture, and religion. In 2002, the Fendi Rigzad Khan Center on Hickok Street was opened by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The center serves Santa Fe's Tibetan community and is the basis for the growth of the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism. Santa Fe is home to the four major lineages of this tradition: Nyingma on Alta Vista Street, Kaju on Airport Road, Sakya on Upper Canyon Road, and Gelug on 2nd Street. The Maha Bodhi Stupa, the first of its kind in the United States, was erected in 1973 on Cerro Gordo Road. The history of the sacred art contained in a stupa began in India during the 4th century. Stupas are believed to embody the living presence of an enlightened mind and to give the protection that comes from the wisdom and compassion taught by the Buddha. Now known as the Cerro Gordo Stupa, it's located in the hills north of Santa Fe and is an ongoing symbol for Dharma activities. The KSK Center was founded in 1975 on Airport Road, and construction of the Bodhi Stupa began in 1982. As one of the largest stupas in the United States, it's utilized by many followers and teachers of Tibetan Buddhism. In 1946, the First Amendment right to practice freedom of religion became a part of Santa Fe history. That year, in a stunning victory, the Supreme Court rendered a 5-4 landmark decision in the United States versus Ballard, which exonerated the I Am faith. Their beliefs stemmed in part from Theosophy, a movement that was started in the United States in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky, which included mysticism and reincarnation as part of its foundation. I Am is considered as one of the first New Age religions with the use of color and light embedded in the foundation of their practices. The science of mind and spirit found its way to Santa Fe in 1960 through the enthusiasm and dedication of businessman Richard J. Gregory. In 1946, while living in Salt Lake City, he discovered the philosophy of science of mind. Impressed with its core concept that Christ's universal presence lives within and that immortality continues on another plane once the body has outlived its usefulness, Gregory founded the Center for Spiritual Living, which today is located on Camino de los Marques. A change in the celestial constellation brought the 5th largest religion in the world to Santa Fe. In astrology, the transition of the Earth moves approximately every 2,150 years. Though accounts differ as to when our planet moved out of the Piscean age, The hippie movement in the late 1960s is credited with ringing in the age of Aquarius. It was an era of transition filled with global turmoil combined with the proliferation of efforts in self-discovery. Yogi Bhajan, the leader of Sikh Dharma International, recognized that the higher consciousness that the hippies were trying to reach through drugs could be achieved by practicing Kundalini Yoga. In teaching this practice during that anxiety-ridden era, he also introduced Sikhism to the Western Hemisphere. In Santa Fe in the 1980s, the two world-renowned religious leaders, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Yogi Bhajan, meet for the first time. Santa Fe has been home to an active community of the Self-Realization Fellowship since 1985. The group follows the Kriya Yoga teachings of the Society's founder, Paramahansa Yogananda. His life story, Autobiography of a Yogi, has been a best-selling spiritual classic that continues to attract generations of followers. Amma first came to Santa Fe in 1987. After her first visit, Amma, like so many people, felt at home in Santa Fe. By 1994, the Amma Center of New Mexico was built in Seton Village near Santa Fe. Amma was born a Hindu and incorporates the universal aspects of Hinduism in her life, but she has said that her religion is love. She experiences the divine in everyone and sees that they are all connected by that fundamental unity of consciousness and love. Amma has been hailed by world leaders as the greatest humanitarian of our time through the work of her organization, Embracing the World. The UDV Christian Spiritist religion began in Santa Fe with a ceremony in July of 1990. It was part of a movement of people from California, New Mexico, and Colorado seeking to preserve and develop a deeper connection with God through communion with divine nature. In 2016, the Udv Temple was built in Arroyo Hondo near Santa Fe. UDV is now practiced by more than 17,000 people in 6 countries. The UDV headquarters are located in Brasilia, Brazil, where it supervises the work of UDV in the United States. Santa Fe was the first of 9 UDV centers in the country. The name União do Vegetal in Brazilian Portuguese means the union of plant. The name refers to the union among the people that participate in the religious practice of drinking ayahuasca tea, as well as the union of the 2 plants used to make the tea from the Brazilian Amazon. The tea is revered as a sacrament serving to heighten spiritual understanding and perception to bring the practitioners closer to God. UDV was founded by Jose Gabriel da Costa, or Mestre Gabriel, who is pictured above. Since the mid-20th century, Santa Fe has been referred to as the city different because of our anything goes attitude. This mindset includes the diversity of its spirituality. In a city with a population of close to 85,000, it's a place of refuge for many spiritual seekers surrounded by the mountain vortex of Santa Fe, the city of holy faith.